This Saturday episode of New Politics was released on the 30th of May, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
Has the National Anti-Corruption Commission ever lived up to its promise? And why has its commissioner resigned after less than 3 years in the job? When an anti-corruption body fails to investigate corruption, the entire political system loses its credibility. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And if you're listening in and haven't subscribed to our website at New Politics, you're missing out on half of what we do. There's regular articles and analysis of this strange world of politics. It's all free, and you can subscribe at newpolitics.com.au. And of course, if you do want to support us, it's just $5 per month at Patreon and Substack, and all of this is a good way to support independent journalism.
This is an historic moment. First and foremost, the people of the Commonwealth are no longer prepared to tolerate practices which might once have been the subject of, if not acceptance, at least acquiescence. You have clearly expressed the desire for a Commonwealth anti-corruption agency. In doing so, it has enacted legislation which embodies the best practice principles for corruption commissions.
That was the Commissioner of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, Paul Brereton, speaking in July 2023 when the Commission was first created, and he has resigned from his position. He did that during the week, and he suggested that there was too much focus on him personally and it was drawing attention away from the work of the National Anti-Corruption Commission. It's just a pity, David, that it took him 3 years to work this out. But Paul Brereton was a totally inappropriate choice in the first place. He had to recuse himself from so many of the hearings because he knew the people who were fronting up to him at the Anti-Corruption Commission. Says a lot about him as a commissioner as well, and also because he had so many relationships with people in the military who were fronting up to the National Anti-Corruption Commission as well. And even then, he didn't recuse himself fully. He also continued to work with the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force after he did become the commissioner. So essentially, David, that's one problem out of the way. But I think the bigger problem is the National Anti-Corruption Commission itself. It's close to useless because it's so ineffective. It's almost a case of it would be better if it wasn't there at all. And this is a really big mess for the Labor government. Now, sure, it might not affect everyone in the electorate out there, but it was introduced in July 2023 with big fanfare, and it's really failed to do its job.
It does affect everybody because if the system is corrupt, the system is not fit for purpose. The model they should have used was a New South Wales model set up by Liberal Attorney General John Dowd under the Greiner government, and they appointed Ian Temby, who was a Queen's Counsel then, States Counsel today, and Tenby was a man of unimpeachable integrity, tenacious as all get out, fearless, and knew that the job he had to do was more important than the relationships that I think it was expected he protect. Almost instantly they get results. Corrupt council officials, state ministers, state opposition ministers. Now, Nick Greiner had set it up to try and get rid of the New South Wales Labor right. They did investigate the Labor right, but for all of the faults of the Labor right, they were pretty procedurally honest.
They ended up getting rid of himself.
And it ended up getting rid of himself. He tried to put Terry Metherell into the position ahead of the EPA. Now, as Greiner pointed out, Metherell was eminently qualified to run the job. But it was so obviously a way to get Metherell out of the Liberal seat that he had become an independent in, so that the Liberals could win it back, that the Commission said this is corrupt. Greiner took it to the New South Wales Supreme Court, who found that ICAC had overstepped their bounds in one way. It was a technicality, which Greiner said, this has cleared my name. And To be fair, a lot of voters thought that while he acted corruptly, he wasn't personally corrupt, that he had overstepped his mark.
But I think it is a really missed opportunity, because I think that when the Anti-Corruption Commission was created, it's only 3 years old, but I think that there were a lot of public expectations about it being successful. And this was after the years of scandals from the Morrison government, mainly the Morrison government. There was Robodebt, the sports rorts, massive blowouts on consultancy fees, all of those deals that Scott Morrison was trying to make with the Governor General at the time, and also the many ministries that he set up for himself. And I think generally just that growing distrust in politics in itself. And I think the Albanese government said that the National Anti-Corruption Commission was a historic democratic reform that would restore integrity and accountability to public life. But nearly 3 years on, and I think it is coming up to 3 years, where you think, where are all the major political investigations? There haven't been any, and they've secured a small number of convictions. It's 11 people or 11 convictions over the past 3 years, so that's less than 4 per year. And most of them, I think there's been about 4 of those that have been sent to jail. The rest of them have been given community service and stuff like that. And all of it has been lower level public sector misconduct. And they haven't touched any senior politicians or uncovered any major corruption. And you could argue, well, these investigations are legally complicated and might take a few years, but they've already had a few years, and this is what they've come up with. It's a very cautious organisation. It's very secretive. No one really knows what it's doing. Seems like Paul Brereton didn't even know what it was doing. But the general public, and this is a conversation that's been going on for well over a decade, well, the general public wanted something quite powerful. They wanted a very powerful anti-corruption body, but we've ended up with something that's quite weak and quite powerless.
Robodebt was the test. Now, let's think this through a little bit. You don't want to set it up so it even looks like you've gone after the other side. So I get an element of caution there, that you don't want to set it up and suddenly you've arrested 11 ex-Liberal ministers and no ex-Labor ministers, for example.
Oh, but David, I want to see people in stocks in Martin Place. That's what I want to see. Rotten tomatoes, rotten vegetables. Yeah. That's what I want to see.
Robodebt was such a thing that everyone involved in that decision-making process, which was seen to be wrong, being told this can't work, it's illegal, do it anyway. At that point, you've broken the law. When your legal advice is saying this is illegal, it'd be like if you came to me, Eddie, and said, let's go and rob a bank. And I said, sure. And then I claim, I didn't realize Eddie asked me to do it. I thought it must have been legal, even though...
I'm impressed that you think that I'm the sort of person that would be capable of doing that.
But it showed the arrogance of the Morrison government, that Morrison thought he was so deeply loved he'd get away with it. I'd get the Michael Scott vibes. You want to be loved or feared? I want them to fear how much they love me, type thing. But yeah, Morrison should have gone down. They should have been sent to trial. It's unlikely they would have gone to jail. And of course, you had the Gladys Berejiklian response to ICAC, which was not to leave it alone, but to say, this is getting a bit close to our political side. Let's cut the funding. Mike Baird cut the funding. Gladys Berejiklian cut the funding. I suspect Dominic Perrottet would have cut the funding had he had the chance. But for a long time, ICAC itself was untouchable. That it was set up with a set budget that could not be adjusted except added to.
Change the legislation for that.
But government now has an opportunity to set it up properly. I don't know that they can contest Robodebt, sadly.
There might be a possibility for that, but I just feel that most of the public anger surrounding the National Anti-Corruption Commission, I think it's directly related to the leadership of Paul Brereton. And you mentioned it before, the defining issue was with Robodebt, where many people, we commented on that at the time. There's a lot of people that have behaved very corruptly within this process, and I think many people would have expected that the National Anti-Corruption Commission would have inspected or investigated the ministers, the Prime Minister and the senior public servants who were associated with that. And we have to remember that the findings of the Robodebt Royal Commission, they were held back a bit. I think it was by a couple of weeks or something like that. So it could be referred to the Anti-Corruption Commission, which hadn't been created at that time. And I think it was just behind by about 2 weeks. And it also had that sealed section that was meant to have been released as well. Here's what the Prime Minister said at the time back in 2023.
It's pretty clear that the correspondence from the Royal Commissioner, Catherine Holmes, makes it clear in her wording of her letter to the government. It's not about people being, the sealed section remaining sealed forever, in her words, to read from the letter. I recommend that this additional chapter remain sealed and not be tabled with the rest of the report, so as not to prejudice the conduct of any future civil action or criminal prosecutions. My view is that clearly is saying that is the period in which this information is being kept for the purpose of not prejudicing that action.
David, we're still waiting to see that sealed section, and we can suspect some of the names, but we can't mention them for legal reasons. But
if we're wrong, we're in a lot of trouble. And to be fair, rightly, if innocent people shouldn't be besmirched.
Well, that's right. And we're not going to name the names for legal reasons, but I'd say it possibly, potentially includes the name of a former Prime Minister. I won't say which one. Possibly, potentially includes the name of several social services ministers, but we're not going to mention any names. But the Anti-Corruption Commission will have failed to investigate any of these people. None of these people at all. None of them. And also Paul Brereton, I mentioned that he's probably the cause of a lot of this anger, but he had to recuse himself over perceptions of conflict of interest because he knew so many people who were going to be appearing in front of him. It was like it was happening every lunch break, oh, where's Paul Brereton? Oh, sorry, he's gone off to lunch because he can't appear in front of someone at the commission because there's a conflict of interest there. And I think Paul Brereton became a symbol of that broader problem at the Anti-Corruption Commission. I think it's right that he's resigned and he's gone. And we called for him to go some time ago.
2.5 years too late, really.
Yeah, that's right. But he never should have been there in the first place.
Yeah. I don't know what Mark Dreyfus was thinking in that he didn't even put in ex-Labor lawyers. There was the woman whose top qualification, she resigned last week. She was put on as a commissioner, which was against the guidelines in the commission say that you've got to be a fairly senior lawyer. And there's this complex hierarchy in the law. They know exactly who they're talking about when they say senior lawyer. Her top qualification was a diploma in hotel management. Now, I'm not disparaging her abilities or her competence, but she shouldn't have got the job because she just wasn't qualified. So I don't know what the attorneys general were thinking when they appointed a lot of these people. As I said, if they were Labor hacks who happened to be lawyers, you'd say, okay, yeah, typical. That's not good either. But they were people who the Liberal Party would have appointed. And maybe this is one of the reasons that Mark Dreyfus gets rolled. Of the many reasons that he gets rolled for. Maybe this is one of the unspoken one, that he botched the NACC so badly that it was either get rolled now or wait for it to all come crashing down and it'll be worse for you. I don't know, but there's a scenario in which that's a possibility.
Oh, but it's also a case where this was set up in exactly the way that the government wanted it to be set up, because I think one of the biggest problems with this National Anti-Corruption Commission is that it was never designed to operate like all the other powerful state anti-corruption bodies around Australia. Some of them are very powerful, some of them are a little bit weaker, but they're all pretty strong, particularly the New South Wales ICAC, Independent Commission Against Corruption. But with the national body, there's no public hearings, there's a lot of legal issues as well. There's a lot of behaviours that most people would think would be corrupt. and all of that lobbying and inside influence, the revolving door style of politics, all of the pork barrelling, access to donors. And a lot of people feel that this is either open to corruption or it's actually corrupt itself, but it doesn't actually qualify as corruption under federal laws. So that's a problem in itself. And there's also a lot of problems with finances. It's got limited resources. I'm sure it's got $60 million in its budget each year, but that's not much to deal with the thousands of referrals that they're looking at. But despite all of that funding, they're just not finding any corruption. But it just seems like it was all designed to appear to be tough on corruption without being too dangerous for the government politically, which is, well, that's a corruption in itself when you look at it that way.
Yeah, it's been a massive, massive disappointment. In fact, back in the glory days of 2023, what were the three things that Labor were really to put the Biloela family back home, which they did opening night or election night, and the NACC, and the other one failed too, and it was quietly swept under the carpet and put into the too hard basket. But then the NACC was the one that I think was the priority. The Biloela family was easy. It's a stroke of the minister's pen. And Anthony Albanese rightly announced it on election night. It also meant that they could forget, the whistleblowers, of course. Whistleblowers are still in jail, still fighting for their right to blow the whistle.
Dan Duggan is also in jail for no good reason.
Dan Duggan, yeah. Meanwhile, the Ben Roberts-Smith thing might be a small step in the right direction there, but we'll have to see what the courts say. If the courts get him, I've heard rumours, and I don't know that they're true, that he's actually not in the country now. But I don't know if that's true, if that's just wishful thinking from either his supporters or the people who don't expect anything will come from it. Hello to Ben if he's listening.
Or maybe joining Ronald Biggs in Brazil. You never know.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that you will never completely stamp corruption out. But a good NACC or a good ICAC or a good anti-corruption commission should work as a strong enough deterrent that it stops a lot of corruption before it starts.
Oh, that's absolutely right, David. You're never going to get rid of corruption. I think it's a human condition, but the idea is to reduce it as much as possible, and it's still pretty much an open door at the moment. But I think that generally the frustration we're showing today, and also that's experienced by a lot of people in the community surrounding this anti-corruption commission, I think it's reflective of that broader frustration with the Albanese government itself, well, shared by us mainly. A lot of people might be saying, look, we don't have that opinion, and that's fine, but that's the opinion that we have. And it's just that many of the reforms that were promised, this idea of these reforms becoming big transformations, hasn't really happened. It's only delivered this sort of cautious, half-hearted approach. And I think the NACC is indicative of that. And even though the National Anti-Corruption Commission was this reform implemented by the Albanese government, well, that's something that needs to be reformed as well. You alluded to that before, but it just needs to be reformed. There also needs to be stronger whistleblower protections if it's going to ever function as a genuine anti-corruption commission.
This is New Politics, independent analysis of Australian and international politics. For more free articles and analysis, join us at newpolitics.com.au.
Full-time role? How many hours are included in this contract? What services are being...
Senator, we can take that on notice, but there are, pursuant to the procurement rules, the contract has key performance indicators over different periods of time in response to what is needed in relation to the Royal Commission.
So this is not a full-time...
No. It's just an advisory contract, yeah.
So $200,000 just for ad hoc advice?
I didn't say that, Senator. It's for... there are key performance indicators in the contract. It's paid on a monthly basis for monthly.
And so what's...
And again, Senator,
what's the,
it would be my staff who signed off on the value
Sure.
for money proposition, so we'd be happy to take any
That'd be
details
great, Ms
of that
Foster.
on
Maybe on notice, like, you know, the invoicing, is it an hourly
No, it's
rate?
monthly. It's monthly.
But included in that is an hour. Do you have to account for the hours that you've actually worked, or is it even if we don't need any services in March, we still pay you?
I don't know. I have to take that on notice, Senator.
Now, just this week, we had the case where Gillian Siegel, the special envoy for anti-Semitism, she provided a contract to a company run by Jeroen Finkelstein. He was a former chief of staff to the Morrison government, of Scott Morrison. And that was a contract worth $200,000 without going to a tender. And we also had the law firm Gilbert and Tobin that was given the contract to be the counsel assisting of the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and social cohesion. Again, got large sums of money, but there's no tender. And I think that's actually quite a corrupt process, but it's never going to be investigated by the Anti-Corruption Commission in the way that it's operating at the moment, when it probably should be. So you, in this particular case, got an unelected official giving out contracts to more people who are unaccountable. And that is something that, to me, is open to corruption, and it actually looks a little bit like corruption as well. And I just think that this is going to be an ongoing problem when the political system just seems to be incapable of minimising that corruption that we talked about before. You're not going to stamp it out completely, but the goal is to minimise that within government, and can't even be bothered looking for it when these problems do arise. And I think we just have to wait to see who the new commissioner is going to be, but that's probably not going to make that much difference until the system or the commission itself changes, and it's going to be more or less the same unless the overall commission does change.
Yeah, now's the time to fix it. And they could probably do a lot of good and repair at least some of the damage. They're never going to repair the grief of the people who committed suicide due to Robodebt and have now watched those responsible go scot-free. And I use Scott in a...
We weren't going to mention any names, David.
No, but you can restore public faith in it and have it as it should be, the best in the Federation, better than New South Wales, better than Victoria, better than South Australia, and those are high standards. But that's what it should be. Anything under that, and it's at best a political weapon to hook into your opponents. At worst, it's a placebo, which won't work because people see the corruption anyway and say, yes, it went to the NACC. It's becoming a joke, and you don't want that.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month. And we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.